Welcome, everyone. Hello, I'm Teresa Gano, Project Associate for Lifetime Learning in UVA's Office of Engagement. We have over 950 registered for today's presentation, Inflation and Your Personal Finances. We are thrilled to welcome you, and I am eager to learn right along with you. We received many questions in advance of this program. Should you have a question during the program, please add it to the Q&A box. Our speaker will answer as many questions as time permits. We are recording this event and we'll post it on our website in a couple of weeks. We are fortunate to have a University of Virginia financial expert with us today, Dorothy Kelly. And allow me to introduce her now. Dot Kelly is the Robert B. Hardaway Jr. Lecturer in Personal Finance in the McIntire School of Commerce at the University of Virginia. Dot graduated from the Darden Graduate School of Business Administration and teaches personal finance, Comm 2730, to students who are not enrolled in the McIntire School of Commerce. She also serves as director of the CFA Program Partner Initiative at McIntire, assisting students who may be interested in pursuing careers in investments and enrolling in the CFA program. We are excited to learn during the next hour. Dot, we welcome you to this Lifetime Learning Engaging the Mind program, and the microphone is all yours.
Thank you, Teresa. It's great to be here, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. I'm really appreciative of everyone's time, and especially of all the great questions that people submitted. And I hope we can answer at least a few of them. There was quite a variety, and it's a big topic, and there's a lot of, as I say, personal finance is personal, so different people's situations vary dramatically. So let's talk about what's going on, and let's get started with talking about inflation and your personal finances. So when we started talking about this, I came up with a very simple topic of inflation and your personal finances. And after reading the questions that people submitted, I thought, well, let's talk about inflation, your personal finances, as well as perspective, because I think that will help a lot of people if we think about things in context. So what's going on right now? Inflation, as we all know, is the highest it's been in decades. It's been very uncomfortable. It's caused a lot of discomfort and concern for every person, no matter what your economic situation is. Some people are having a tougher time than others, but because it's affecting everyone, of course, public policy makers and leaders are also concerned. So you can see here, it isn't just in the US, it is also in the Eurozone. And to put it further into perspective, as bad as it is in the US and in the Eurozone, it's worse in other places as well. This is the global outlook for 2022. I think this was written in the spring. So hopefully, well, I do know Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is adamant that he is going to tackle and seek price stability. And so I don't think we have to worry about triple-digit inflation, but it's going to be more uncomfortable than we're used to for a while. So what does it look like historically in the US? We've said it's the highest it's been in 40 years. And if you look at what kind of episodes have caused inflation in the past, you can see some commonalities. One, oil prices. Energy is used in producing all of our goods and services. And when energy prices increase, there's a ripple effect and inflation follows. The other thing is following the war, you'll notice there were supply and demand imbalances and logistical constraints. And that also, following the World War II, caused inflation. So what are we seeing now? Sort of the same thing in 2022. We had a big increase in oil prices. and a significant imbalance in supply and demand for various goods. Energy has climbed, as we all know, has climbed significantly. And because energy is a big component of almost all of our goods and services, it's had this ripple effect. Food costs more, shipping costs more. So it's just driven all prices up. And because energy prices have gone up significantly, we're all feeling the pain. We just can't avoid it. Weekly gasoline prices, if you've been filling up lately, you know that it's a lot better than it was in June. At the beginning of June or late May, gas prices in Virginia hit about $5 a gallon. They were close, they were well past $6, $7, $8. I think I heard $10 in California. The average across the country was $5 a gallon. And now it is down significantly. It's down 10 to 20%, depending on what state you're in. And that has really helped a lot because anybody who commutes knows it's a big deal. The other thing is it's not entirely surprising that the prices surged in late May, early June. That is sort of peak vacation time for the US. Lots of people are planning their trips, and especially this particular summer, people had postponed trips and they were determined to take their trips this summer. So a huge surge in energy demand, and alongside with that energy demand, we're coming off low productivity. All right, crude oil production dropped dramatically at the beginning of the pandemic. And of course, prices dropped dramatically as well. You had this enormous imbalance. You had people stopped moving. They stopped going to work. They stopped going out. They stopped traveling. And so oil production prices dropped dramatically. And when oil producers can't sell their product because no one's traveling, they stopped production. And so it wasn't until the vaccines started taking place, people started feeling comfortable and moving again. And then, so demand for oil and energy increased, and it took a while for production to catch, to resume. It's not a light switch, had to catch up. And you can see weekly gas prices surged with the demand, and now they're backing off a little bit. Oops, I'm sorry. The good news is, the really good news is, even though energy prices have surged, the world's gotten a whole lot more efficient with how much energy and how far we get on a barrel of oil than we did in the 1970s and early 80s when we last had the same kind of inflation. And that is a cause for celebration. Anyone who's my age or older would remember, yes, really high gas prices and energy prices in that time period, but not just high prices, but also rationing. Even if you had the money, you couldn't go to the gas station and fill up anytime you wanted. There were days you could fill up and days you couldn't fill up. So the fact that we've gotten more efficient with our energy is helping mitigate some of this pain, right? And again, this is not unique to the US. Oil production dropped dramatically. It was a global pandemic. Everyone cut production. And so when we were very fortunate that vaccines came along as quickly as they did, but it took a while. It has taken a while for oil production to resume. It's still not back to its original peak of November 2018. And we'll see if that happens. Right? Another concern, in addition to the global pandemic, of course, is the situation in Ukraine and the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia as a result. And so in the EU, they're feeling a tremendous amount of pain in terms of energy prices. It is not only oil, but also other, gas pipelines, for instance. So much so that in the UK, for instance, they are very concerned that their citizens are going to have to choose between food and heat this winter. And they are actually, the policymakers are making plans for having warming centers because they're very concerned that people will not be able to absorb a 60, 70, or 80% increase in their energy and heating costs in the winter. So that is a big concern for the EU. All right, so energy is a big part of inflation, and it ripples throughout all the other things. So what are we talking about when we do talk about inflation? We're talking about the cost, the rising cost of everything, right? And so the how does the Federal Reserve measure or track inflation? Oftentimes we hear about the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, but the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell's chair of the Federal Reserve, their preferred method is the personal consumption expenditures, which is produced by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. I'm sorry. And the difference is the CPI is just out-of-pocket costs, and the PCE covers other costs too. And one thing that you'll point out, you'll see very clearly is this green section here, medical care. And most of you are probably aware of how much healthcare costs have increased in the US, how much they increase and how much they continue to increase. They keep going upwards. And sometimes people feel it in their pocket and sometimes they don't, because sometimes it's absorbed through their insurance, but it's still a cost to society. If your insurance rate goes up, if you're employed and your health insurance climbs a lot of times, and this happened especially after the ACA was introduced, companies reduced the amount of salary increases because they were spending more money on health insurance. So if your health insurance, if you have to, if your costs are going up, like health insurance is going up 10%, it's hard to give your employee a 10% raise as well. So you have to find some way to balance that. So think about the differences in these two and understand when the news media are talking about CPI, those aren't the only numbers that the Federal Reserve is looking at. And most importantly, I want you to think about what's your personal inflation rate, all right? Think about these categories and how they translate into your life, because some things, for instance, transportation, cars, the cost of cars and things have gone up a lot. But if you don't need a car, you're not feeling that cost, right? So what is your personal inflation rate? You can see energy, gasoline was a big deal. And that again bleeds through to, your food and other things. But used cars and trucks, as well as new rental cars and trucks, and new cars went up significantly last year. It was just phenomenal, quite unbelievable. Used cars increased something like 40% from during one period, 12-month period. And that's just unheard of. So if you didn't need to buy a new used car, you could insulate yourself from that. Another thing that's gone up a lot, because people are traveling again, there's that pent-up demand to travel, lodging, hotels, etc. And but you can also see other things, things like beef, things that you have to transport are going up with inflation because energy prices are going up. All right, so once you understand what your personal inflation rate is, you have to think about how can you manage it. And I talk about the 5 Ps. Okay, so plan. Inflation is always there. It's always a concern. Sometimes it's more of a concern than others. It ebbs and flows. Even at 2% inflation, which is what the Federal Reserve's long-term target is, even at 2% inflation, the cost of whatever you're thinking about buying is going to double in 36 years, which if you're a new grad, 36 years seems a lifetime, you know, very long time from now. But if you're like my age or older, you realize 36 years goes by really fast. And oh yeah, that the price has doubled even with low inflation. So higher inflation makes it worse, but even with low inflation, you have to try to plan and make a financial plan that takes into account both long-term stable prices at 2%, as well as periods of higher inflation. All right, so if you're in a period of higher inflation, what can you do? Think about postponing your purchases. Do you really need to buy a car? Can you postpone when cars are increasing? Used cars are going up 40% in price. Housing was going up significantly last year. Do you really need it then, or can you postpone that purchase? And we as humans, we tend to think that what's happening now will continue for a long time. But as you get older, you realize that's not so. And looking at inflation from a historical perspective helps you realize, okay, it's bad right now. It's not going to stay this way. Another thing to look into is protection. Okay, so what can you do to protect yourself and your assets? And there are certain assets that do better with inflation or during periods of inflation than others. And there's some assets that do terribly during inflation. And so if you build a diversified portfolio, that can help mitigate and lessen the pain. Things that do well in inflationary times include hard assets, such as commodities and real estate, right? Things that do badly during periods of inflation, that do badly are bonds, because when you lend money to someone and the inflation is going to eat away at the principal that you're going to recover or get back years down the road. So bonds are terrible. There's a real cost to investing in bonds when there's inflation. If you're a bond issuer, it's great. Lots of people want to issue bonds when there's inflation because you're going to be paying it back with much cheaper dollars. So protect your portfolio. Prevention. If you don't, you may want to try and postpone purchases. Well, how can you do that? Well, take care of the things you own. Learn to maintain and utilize the things that you have. There's a lot of people do not understand how to take care of some of the things in their homes, their cars, their their devices and things, and they wind up buying new ones rather than just maintaining something and getting a long useful life out of it. Cars are a good example. In cars can go a very long time if they're well maintained. And so keep that in mind. Try to prevent the need to purchase new. And then there's the perspective, looking at a historical perspective as well as a global perspective. Yes, the inflation is not, it's very uncomfortable. It's not what we want to see. It's not what the Federal Reserve wants to see. It becomes dangerous if people start thinking it's going to last forever. And so that is a problem, but it is nowhere near as bad as it has been in the past. It's nowhere near as bad as it has been in other countries, either now or in the past. And really what we know, understanding that, we can help make better decisions so we don't get there. The reality is, from perspective point of view, is Fed Chairman Powell said in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, a couple of weeks ago, there will be pain. He's determined to bring about price stability. And pain means he's going to keep raising interest rates, and raising interest rates is going to have an impact on a number of, on a lot of people, a lot of industries, particularly home construction, home building and construction. Anyone who wants to borrow money is going to have to pay more for it. Anyone who is borrowing money is going to pay more for it. And so there will be job losses in the home construction and possibly other industries. And there's really no escaping that. So understanding it, saying, okay, there's going to be pain. How can I prepare for that? Also I want people to put into perspective on the relationship between unemployment and inflation. So following the Great Recession, or around the Great Recession, we had really low inflation. We had almost deflation for a little bit, but we had enormous unemployment. And so for people, there's how much unemployment are you willing to accept versus how much inflation? And right now we have very good employment numbers and higher than desirable inflation. Where is the trade-off? And that's what Fed Chair Powell has to deal with. All right. So in addition to pain, whenever there's pain, there's also opportunity. I mean, there's opportunity for growth, and there's when there's a change in balance and supply and demand, there's opportunity. And if you have the time and inclination, you can try to position yourself to take advantage of the opportunities that will be presenting themselves. Interest rates go up, home prices are going to correct. So if you're an owner, that means they might be coming, your house might not be worth quite as much as it is now in the future, in the short-term future, I should say. But if you're thinking about buying a house and you're thinking, oh, they're kind of expensive right now, or I don't have enough money, there may be opportunities coming your way in the not too distant future. So understanding that this is not a long-term situation. It has been caused by, a lot of it has been caused because of the changes from the pandemic, the drastic reduction in oil supplies and production and demand, and then the slow resumption of both of those, as well as just human nature all of us stopped doing things during the pandemic, and now we've got this pent-up demand. Even now, if you look, so shipping costs are down about 60% from where they were earlier this year. That is also going to be good news for products and for companies and consumers. And also there is, if you remember how bad the supply chain situation was 10 months or so ago, all of that seems to, much of that, those products have arrived and they're in warehouses now, and actually retailers have too much. And so there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be liquidated at very low prices. That'll cause hits to the company's accounting and financial statements, but it could be very helpful for consumers who are stretched thin. They may be able to find some real bargains on some of these products. So a number of people want to know, okay, so if I want to think about what are the opportunities, what can I do, and what's done well during inflation and what hasn't. And this is almost 100 years of data regarding stocks, bonds, treasury bills, and inflation since January 1926. Doesn't cover this 2022, it only goes by years. But if you look, so stocks overall they have an advantage over bonds and treasuries at best keep up with inflation. All right. So if you want to keep your purchasing power, you can invest in treasuries, short-term treasuries, or savings bonds are a good option right now. But bonds don't do great, okay, in terms of getting, you might be able to maintain your purchasing power with these investments, but you are not going to get a lot of real growth. The real growth comes from investing in stocks and equities over the long term. And sometimes, in particular, growth stocks do well or have an advantage in inflationary times, because if it's a growth company it's growing faster than the economy, if it's a company that's producing something that people are moving towards, it's a new product, and it's a substitute for something that they were using, and now they're using this because it's cheaper or it's easier. And so those companies, growth stocks, tend to do better than anything else during inflationary times. Again, we don't know how long this will last, and we hope it won't last very long. The other thing about stocks is if it's a companies that sell products, some of those companies can pass the price increases along to their customers, and some can't. Some find it very difficult. Customers will just substitute something cheaper, but those companies that can pass along the price increases to their customers tend to do better. And especially if they have a dividend and regular cash flow, people with investments in those can do better than some of the other alternatives, right? And I just included this slide in case someone wanted to know about, looking at what's the price of gas versus a price of oil versus the S&P 500. S&P 500, i.e. the stock market, likes, it favors low oil prices. Why? Low energy prices makes it easier to build things and ship things and profit from that. And when energy prices are high, it's more costly to build things, ship things, and it's harder to make a profit. So that's it, Teresa. Yeah, I think now would be a good time to see what kind of questions people have.
Okay, great. Thank you for that informative presentation, Dot. I learned a lot. Now we have an opportunity for Q&A segment to address some questions from the audience. Some of these we received prior, and some are live right now. So let's get into it. Thank you. So what, in retrospect, were the best investments during similar moments of rising inflation historically?
So as I said before, things that do really well during inflationary periods, commodities, the price changes right with inflation, right? So you can, commodities are a great option, and real assets, so real estate. For those of you who have been tracking your portfolio or your net worth, I use Mint, and Mint has shown me, oh, my 401k is down, but my home value has gone up. So your real estate valuation has gone up while your equities have gone down. Equities some equities can hold their value during inflationary periods of time. But it's not necessarily a given. Some companies are going to do better than others. Overall, as we saw in the chart, stocks do better and provide more real growth that is after inflation than bonds or treasuries.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Another question. How do you maintain purchasing power in your lower risk investment bucket when TIPS often trade with negative real yields, and even when positive, likely trail inflation after taxes?
Yeah, that's a great question. What's been very popular this year, everybody's flocking to, is the savings bonds. They're inflation adjusted savings bonds. They've been, the rate of return sets every 6 months, and you get the rate of return based. based on what the current inflation is. The thing about it, there's a lot going on with iSavings bonds, and you can look it up. Everybody's been with any cash sitting around, has been flocking to them, but there's a limit. You can't buy a lot. If you have a big portfolio, you're limited in how much you can put in there. The other thing is your financial advisors, not necessarily, or if you have a broker, they don't make any money selling those. You have to actually go directly and buy it from the Treasury. There's no middleman. So but that hasn't stopped people from recognizing and journalists from saying, hey, this is where you should be putting your cash. If you have cash that's sitting around and it's losing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10% in purchasing power, and you don't want to put it into a long-term investment, an iSavings bond is going to help preserve that purchasing power.
Okay, so jumping off of that, then, if you are saving for a down payment or medium-term 2 to 3 year goal, does it make sense to buy an iBond when you lose 3 months of interest because you cash out before 5 years?
I think so, but you have to run the numbers. I mean, so if you look at what having the money would be, think about whenever you think about financial decisions, I always think about what's the opportunity cost. If I take the money that's here and I can put it here and make X, or here and make Y, which one is the better choice? And so here, if I put it here in the iSavings bonds, I can make X. If I have to take it out early, I'm going to make a little less than X. And it's still, once you run the numbers, it's probably going to be more than what you could get in a savings account, your current savings account. So you do run the numbers, you look at it. It doesn't have to be complicated math, but you can figure out, okay, yeah, that's worth that risk, because I'm giving up 3 months, but I'm getting 9 months of really good returns compared to what current savings accounts are doing. Here's an interesting thing. So last time interest rates were this, I'm sorry, not interest rates, but last time we had high inflation, passbook saving, most people saved in passbook savings accounts, which paid like 5.5% or 6% interest. When Paul Volcker took over in the Fed and decided he was going to crush inflation, he raised interest rates to double digits. And so 6% in your passbook savings was losing a lot of money. And so the financial services industry is very innovative, and they introduced and promoted money market accounts, which now most people are aware of. And money market accounts were a way to get a much better return. Right now in money market accounts, they're paying better than they were a year ago, but they're still not paying great because interest rates, the Fed has been raising interest rates, but they're not as anywhere near as painful as they have been in the past. Mortgage rates are up. They're almost double what they were a year ago. But right now, iSavings bonds seem to be the most, the best risk reward for cash.
Okay. All right, thank you. Quickly, you mentioned Mint, M-I-N-T. Can you tell us what that is? There are a couple questions about that.
Yeah, so Mint is it's an app on my phone. It's run by Intuit, which runs TurboTax and what's the other one? Quicken Books and Quicken. It's a personal finance technology firm, basically. And I've used Quicken for many years. I used TurboTax for many years, and Mint came along, and it's just right there on my phone. It's a lot faster and easier. It's not nearly as robust as Quicken. I loved Quicken. I could do all kinds of analysis and things like that, but it required a lot more work on my part. With Mint, I simply connect all my accounts, and it gives me a snapshot of my net worth, my spending, my investments every time I look at it. And so it's probably not healthy to look at it as often for some people, but I'm a personal finance geek. And so I spend a lot of time looking and tracking and measuring. So but there are others. It's just, that's the one that I've been using. And it's very clearly demonstrated to me that even though stock market's down, my home value, because it gets my home value off of Zillow, right? It connects, it says, oh, on Zillow. And if you talk to real estate agents and appraisers, I was speaking to one last year, and I said, well, Zillow says this. And they said, oh, well, that's good enough for us. They basically, are pretty happy with the way Zillow was appraising values, or determining market values. So the important thing is you should track your personal finances so that you can develop a plan of where you want to be and check your progress. And whether you do it on pen and paper or on a spreadsheet or with an app, it's whatever works for you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go large again here. What is the real impact of government spending on inflation?
As well, if you looked at the slides, really, and not just what's going on right now, but if you look at the historical, what was causing the inflation in these other episodes is energy prices drive inflation, and supply constraints and pent-up demand drive inflation. So when if the government is, in there buying a lot of things, that's going to do it too. But it's not necessarily, some people want to blame whoever's in the White House for the current state of inflation. And I don't think that's looking at the whole picture. It's more complicated, and, it's global. And but I will say that I have been concerned about inflation or coming inflation for several years before the pandemic hit, because of the U.S. has been running a deficit for decades. And eventually there's just too much money. And also, how do you pay off a debt that big? If you remember what I said about borrowers love inflation. Why? Because they're paying back the money with deflated dollars. So if you're a big borrower, inflation works to your benefit. So I've been very concerned about that the U.S. has been a big borrower for decades, not just this year and not just last year, but for decades we've been borrowing money. And I'm not an economist, but I'm very concerned about what the long-term inflation rate will be, whether we can maintain 2%. I don't know if we can maintain 2% without, as Chairman Powell said, he says there will be some pain to get to 2%. Could be a lot of pain, or to maintain 2% could be a lot of pain.
Okay.
But I'm not an economist, so maybe you can get one of the economics professors to come on and talk more about that.
All right, thank you. What instruments available to accredited investors provide the best hedge against inflation?
Oh, great. So accredited investors are investors who meet certain SEC criteria, and by virtue of their income and or net or wealth level, they are termed accredited, which means they're eligible to participate in investments that the average person might not. The SEC regulates investments for the average, for you and me. And then there are accredited investors, and the theory is the SEC says if you have that much wealth and income, we don't have to look after you quite so carefully. You're smart enough to assess your own risk reward for yourself without us. So because they have better options or more options, they can invest in hedge funds. Hedge funds The best thing about a hedge fund is they can go short. So right now, we know that Chairman Powell said interest rates are going to go up and there's going to be pain. Well, when that happens, you can kind of guess what's going to go on, and hedge funds can go short, and so they can make a profit from declining prices. Whereas my 401k, I can't go short in my 401k. I just got to either try to time the market, which is a bad idea, or just accept the fact that it's going to go down for a while. And what my advice to people is, if you have a good job, take it as in perspective. Look at the fact that, okay, the market's down, but every paycheck I'm buying more shares.
Mhm.
So it's not all bad. It's a problem. It's very uncomfortable, especially as you get closer to retirement. But if you're putting money in and you have a stable job, you're buying more shares when the stock market's down. And that's a good thing.
Okay. All right. So you just,
Okay. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
But so back to the accredited investors. So hedge funds, that's a real advantage that most people don't have. The other thing is real estate investments and real estate partnerships. As I said, real estate does great during inflation. But real estate's really a long-term investment. Okay, it just happens to, and we hope this inflation is not going to be long-term. I would say those are the two big things, but there's just so many more opportunities for accredited investors. And I encourage them to take advantage of that, but also to recognize timing the market is a challenge for anybody.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Can you speak about the pros and cons of annuities?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the things that policy leaders and academics and researchers and people are worried about with the move from, in the old days, we had defined benefit plan, pension plans, retirement plans like your grandfather had, where he worked at one place, and then when he retired, he got that salary or some portion of that salary for the rest of his life. And it was very consistent, and he didn't have to worry about it, and he just got a check. And he didn't have to learn any of this stuff or make any of the decisions. Well, then in the 80s, we moved towards these defined contribution plans where employees and employers contribute to these funds, and the employee has to make decisions on where to invest and how much and how and when to pull it out. And it's a lot of work for people, and it can be daunting. People have recognized that a lot of people aren't great at that. So they've said, there have been changes to the laws, and they're allowing annuities to be offered. Annuities are like those pension. It's a constant check. Okay. It's an insurance contract. The beauty of it is it's a check, and you can count on it all the time coming, because it's an insurance, it's a contract. So that takes away some of this angst that we were talking about. The downside is annuities have very high fees. That's a bad thing. The other thing is, depending on how it's structured, if it's an annuity, if it's fixed and there's high inflation, the inflation's going to eat away at those fixed payments you're getting. Another option, depending on what kind of annuity is sometimes it's a sole survivor. So you buy the annuity, and if you pass away, if you live a long time, you collect a lot of money. If you die quickly, if you die before your time, if you die soon or suddenly, the insurance company keeps the money. So nothing is perfect in this world. And some people are looking at it like, well, I'd like some consistency of a pay, that some cash flow, and maybe a small annuity to give me that consistent cash flow would be good. But there are other ways to get cash flows that might also help. And so REITs, are real estate investment trusts, are usually pay very good dividends, or often pay good dividends. But they're tied to the stock market. So you get that valuation change that makes people nervous. So I think annuities have some advantages or some real attraction for some people, but you have to recognize nothing is perfect, and you always have to outweigh those risks and rewards and the costs and benefits of each thing. I would not put all of my money in an annuity. That I would not do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was interesting conversation about that topic. So we actually do need to talk about retirement. We have a couple questions about retirement. What to do with ever decreasing retirement funds right now during retirement? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, okay, so that's a very tough question because there's so many variables.
Right.
One of the reasons I love teaching my class is because I'm trying to educate people at a time when it can make a difference. If you start young and you learn this stuff young and you can keep educating yourself and keep making choices, smart choices, I'm hoping that I'm going to, enrich their lives and, help them achieve financial stability as even if there's some price instability in the world. So the question is, ever decreasing, and so it really depends. Okay, so you have some retirees who they have a lot of money, or they think they do, and they maintain the same lifestyle that they were living before they retired. And soon they figure out, oh, it's not going to last that long. I hope hope you figure it out faster, sooner than, and so you can course adjust. A lot of people that they're talking about, some people who retired during the Great Resignation are realizing, oh, my 401k is down, and I really do, need some income. So they're going back to work, whether maybe in a different capacity, maybe not as many hours, but it keeps the cash flow going. I think keeping cash flow going is really, really important, whether you do it, part-time or, seasonal work, as long as you're physically and mentally able. I think that's great. And I think it's also very healthy to stay engaged and learn new things that way. One of the things about retirement, a cost that is always going up, and hopefully this year might be a little better, but it's health insurance or healthcare, right? As we get older, we need more healthcare, and healthcare is one of those industries that for years has grown, the cost of healthcare has outpaced regular inflation. So that CPI that people talk about is like, well, for some people, if their healthcare has gone up significantly more, and so their personal inflation rate's been much higher. So we're doing what you can to stay healthy, starting from the beginning, but it doesn't matter how old you are. Like, unless you're Queen Elizabeth's age, there's always things you can do to try and improve your health. The other thing is, you can be back to that 5P slides, is try and find ways to prevent, protect yourself and postpone purchases that you don't need or that are out of whack because of the supply chain issues or logistical issues. Protect yourself as much as possible by investing in things that are going to, a diversified portfolio. One of the things I have a health savings account, one of my favorite things, and I have the money that's invested in that. A lot of it is in healthcare companies. I figure I win either way. It's a hedge, okay? Because if healthcare costs continue to go up above inflation, these companies should do well, right? And then I'll have more money to spend on the healthcare costs that are going up more than inflation. So that's sort of my hedge against healthcare costs in my retirement. I'm planning to use that money in retirement. I'm not using it now. I'm planning to use that in retirement. So those are some ideas on trying, but that question is so variable. I would need more details to try and understand what that particular person's pressure points are.
Sure, most certainly. Well, thank you for sharing the health savings tip with us. A lot of,
My pleasure.
I'm actually taking notes as you're speaking as well. So
Great.
So bouncing off of that, that's back up a couple years.
Mhm.
Tips in addition to what you've already, conveyed to us. Any tips or advice for individuals planning to retire within 3 to 5 years, given what is happening right now?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I'm really glad you asked it, because a lot of people, I think, back to perspective, I think a lot of people are really, really worried, and you can almost sense some panic in some people. And it's like, I don't think it's going to last forever. I know, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, you can't guarantee anything, but Jerome Powell is committed. My concern is he's going to cause a lot of pain. But inflation is not going to be, we're not going back to the 1970s, 80s, at least not now. Okay. So if you're retiring or thinking about retiring, your retirement, like Queen Elizabeth lived to be 96 years old. Some of us are going to be blessed with really long lives, and we have to think about, okay, if I have this money, it's gotta keep growing for 30 or more years. So you can't put it in cash and think it's gonna grow. It's going, at best, you will maintain your purchasing power, but that's only if you put it in the savings bonds. And but you have to get actual growth out of that. And so you need to invest in a diversified portfolio and have a fair amount of money invested in, securities that change in value, like equities, real estate, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Here's a question. If interest rates such as mortgage and credit cards have risen so much, why are savings, checking, and MMF rates still so low?
Yeah, money market fund rates. Yes. Yeah, that's the question, right? They have not adjusted, and it's very frustrating. But I think that's partly because they, if they can get your money and they don't have to pay you more, you're still going to park your money with them, then they're going to make the difference. The other thing is, excuse me, it may be that some people in the market don't expect this to last for, that long. I've been frustrated by that too, and I don't really have a great answer for it. So, it's one of those things. It's like, I'd rather, interest rates, Chairman Powell has said interest rates are going to continue to climb. So I suspect some money market fund rates will be changing, but the savings accounts and the checking accounts, they're not going to move for a long time, because the banks know that money's kind of what they call sticky, and so that people aren't going to change their banking based on that too much. A lot of people are taking what's in there and moving it to the savings bonds, and I highly recommend people look at those.
Okay, thank you. We have a question. Someone wants to know what topics are covered by your class during the course of the semester.
We go from what some people would call soup to nuts. We start at zero with time value of money, understanding compounding, and we go through budgeting and credit and employee benefits like health insurance and retirement plans. We cover mortgages, insurance, all kinds of insurance, all kinds of credit. And then in the second half of the semester, we cover investing, equities, bonds, alternative assets, and we talk about taxes and estate planning and developing a plan to achieve their financial goals, putting it all together. So you have to start at the very beginning, and then it's a whole lot of stuff.
Wow, Dot, I wish I had had your class years
I
ago.
wish I'd had that class in college too.
All right, we have time for, oh my gosh, I can't believe how quickly this hour has flown. Let's take one more question, where we are after that. Given the risk of inflation and holding cash, how many years of cash should one hold close to retirement?
Well, so in class, we all need an emergency fund, right? And so for students, I say, when you get your first job, you need like 3 to 6 months of living expenses in case, something happens. And the younger you are and the more, the more transferable your skills, the less you need. And also the more of a support network you have. If you can go live with mom and dad for a couple of months while you look for a job, you don't need as much, right? As you get older, you need more. If you lose your job at age 45 or 50, it may be very hard to replace, so you might need 12 or more months, 12 to 24 months. If you're in your 50s, it could be 3 years. But if you're near retirement age and you can look and project how much retirement income you're going to get, and then you can back off and say, well, I don't need 3 years of living expenses because I'm going to have money that I can access the dividends that are in my portfolio once I retire. If you have dividends being paid in your 401k, for instance, you can't access them until you're 59 and a half. But once you are 59 and a half, you can build that into, okay, I'm going to get this percent in dividends every year. And so I don't need quite that much cash. But that period from, 50 to 65-ish, depending on what your situation is, you might need a fair amount of cash to sit around. And that puts a huge drain, it's a drag on your portfolio returns. That's the best I can tell you.
Very quickly, I think you'll probably be able to answer this one very quickly. If my employer doesn't match my 401k contribution, should I still contribute to it?
Yes. Or, well, you could just set up you could consider just investing. Yes, you should. Absolutely. You should also look at an individual retirement account. Okay, because if the employer's not contributing to it, you should also look at what the fees they're charging, because if they're high fees, it might be smarter to just do an IRA. You can't put as much money in an IRA as an employer-sponsored account. So there's that difference. But if you're paying higher fees and you can't put too much in anyway, then the IRA might be a better choice.
Okay.
I don't know if that was clear enough, but
yeah.
And the other thing is, if your employer's not doing that in this current job market, I would look for a new employer.
That's actually what I thought you were going to say initially.
Well, now that's the bottom line. You should do that, but also, in terms of investing, this is how you would look at that choice.
Sure. Okay. Excellent. One last question. May we share your slides with the audience after the event?
Certainly.
There were a lot of folks are very interested in digging into those and looking.
Great.
All right. Dot, my goodness. Thank you so much. This has been informative and engaging. This opportunity for the Q&A has just been lovely. Thank you. Helped us view inflation and financial well-being from many various, that's redundant, but I think angles today. We are very appreciative of your time, Dot, and your expertise.
It's been my pleasure. I thank you all for joining us, and I want you all to stay healthy and wahoo wah.
Thank you. And thank all of you for joining us today. Fall is a busy season in the University of Virginia's Office of Engagement, and we invite you to join us for future programming. You can find specific details and registration links to upcoming programs, faculty blogs, podcasts, and vodcasts at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. From all of us at Lifetime Learning, thank you for joining us today and have a great evening.